Hello, hello, hello. Hey, everyone. How's it going? I'm Rudy Caseres. Welcome to Healing After Heartbreak. We're going to be talking about what it's like to experience heartbreak, both on the receiving and giving end. Unfortunately, it happens. We have all broken someone's heart at some point in our lives, and talk about what we've learned from those experiences, though, and how we can avoid future harmful, hurtful relationships in the past, in the future. And so, again, I'm Rudy Caceres. You're watching this on YouTube. Thank you very much. Please, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. I hope you enjoy this content. And let's take it away from there. Without further ado, let's get on to our esteemed panel of amazing speakers. First, and certainly as most, tell the whole world, the whole universe, the whole healing after heartbreak universe, who is Shira Collings.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shira, and my pronouns are she and they. I'm a therapist in the Philadelphia area. I primarily specialize in eating disorders, disordered eating, and body image. And I also am really passionate about working with neurodivergent folks and LGBTQ plus folks. And I'm really excited about this topic. I feel like it's not something that's talked about enough in the mental health world, and it's obviously very relevant this month. So I'm really looking forward to being here and hearing from the other panelists too.
Yes, and welcome back. We didn't scare you away last time, and I'm glad you're here again talking about a new subject. But you're still going to smash things, right?
Of course.
Mm,
Oh, wait.
mm.
Awesome. Tell the whole world who is Chrissy Hodges.
Hi, my name is Chrissy Hodges. I'm an advocate for OCD, in particular, the community name Pure OCD. My memoir is also titled Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. I'm a certified peer support specialist working with people worldwide to provide support as people work toward recovery, but also to provide referral consultations to experts in the field of specializing in treatment for OCD. I'm the executive director and founder of OCD Game Changers, a nonprofit that does events worldwide to bring community together. And I'm also the co-founder of Peer Recovery Services, and we have a government contract that put peer support specialists in the state institutions in Colorado. And I'm really excited to be here. This is a topic where I have been on both sides of the coin, and my actual lived experience with OCD has impacted both sides. And I'm eager to talk about it because I know that this is, especially in the realm of anxiety and OCD, this is a very relevant topic where people feel very isolated and alone. So thank you for having me, Rudy.
Well, I'm glad you're on. And this isn't a subject that you normally talk about in depth. So I'm excited to have you on. And because like I know I can give you a prompt on OCD. You can talk for hours and hours and hours, and it'll be awesome. So we might throw you some curveballs here today.
Do it.
Great. Moving forward, tell everyone, tell the whole world, everyone watching on YouTube, who is Hannah Blum.
Oh, hello, everyone. I am, as Rudy said, Hannah Blum, and I am a writer, an artist, I'm an author, and most importantly, I am a mental illness activist. I basically got started in media because I came forward about my diagnosis of bipolar 2 disorder, and started creating content across social media and a blog, which kind of went from there. So I do a lot of work in the community as far as activism and speaking out for people with mental illness, talking about the injustices that happen within the system. And then I create art and write poetry and quotes about living with mental illness, but about love, about womanhood, about all sorts of things. And so that's why I'm extra excited today because, like, of course, if you write, you have to talk about love. It's like the fuel to everything. So I'm so happy to be here with the panelists and with you, Rudy, and so grateful and can't wait to hear what everybody has to say.
Yeah, and we go way back, you and I,
Oh,
Hannah,
yeah,
and we've collaborated so many times. I've got your book. I got you interview in
I
person at the
know.
Mighty a couple of years ago. So thank you for throughout the years still being a true friend. I appreciate
Of
that.
course.
All right, let's move on. Last and certainly as most, tell everyone again who is Dean de Benedictus.
Hello. Dean DeBenedictis is a composer, longtime composer, producer, um, who toggles between that and filmmaking a bit. And I've been trying to break into writing, but the toggling between the first two medias has possessed, I should say, most of my life up until now. I've had a lot of experience with heartbreak and transitioning, both positively and negatively. Um, and I philosophize a lot, so I'm happy to join you here on this topic.
Yeah, and thank you for joining. You were a late addition. Unfortunately, Jenny Lind and Sarah Jickling weren't able to be here today. So thank you so much, Dean, for taking on the challenge with very little prompting and just ready to attack. I like that.
You're welcome, and yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's see if we can get this right the first time. There we go. Everyone's in their correct quadrants or pentagons, whatever you want
Hollywood squares, yeah.
to. Yeah. So okay. So again, I'm Rudy Caseres. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter sometimes at Rudy Caceres and rudycaceres.com. And there's a contact form on my website if you want to get in touch, if you want to chat, if you want to work together. I also love producing your virtual event as well. So if you're looking for someone in that department, reach out to me. So let's get into our first question, and it is a doozy. And here we go. Have you dealt with heartbreak in the past, and how have you dealt with heartbreak in the past, and how does it still affect you now? The way we'll go is Shira, Dean, Chrissy, Hannah, and since there's only four of you, like we'll have a little bit more time, but still, watch that time, Dean. I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's go on to Shira.
This is such a good question and a hard question, I think. But yeah, I definitely have been affected by heartbreak in the past, as I think everyone has. And I think it definitely still affects me now. I think the main way that I've dealt with it is by reaching out to supportive people who get it. I think one of the hardest parts of dealing with heartbreak is that it's so not talked about in our culture, or I think it's often really dismissed or trivialized. Um, I think in a lot of my past experiences, what was hard was that a lot of people would say, like, oh, yeah, that's not that big of a deal, or you're so young almost. Like I think there was some ageism that came up around it. You're so young, like you can't have felt this strongly about someone. Um, or just everyone goes through this, so just kind of get over it. And so I think what has helped is really reaching out to people who are supportive and validating and get that it's really, really painful and so distressing. And I think also reaching out to people who are not pathologizing of being affected by it. I think definitely as as an AFAB person, as a woman identifying person, like I think a lot of women and AFAB people are pathologized for being heartbroken or for being really invested in romantic relationships and kind of having mental health consequences if those end. Um, and I think a lot of people, like I'm thinking a lot of women are called like crazy or possessive or too much if we are invested in those relationships. And so I think what's been helpful to me is kind of finding spaces where that's seen as normal and that's seen as okay, and it's okay to to want a romantic relationship as a priority and to feel really sad and heartbroken and devastated when that's not going well or when that ends.
And we have an acronym alert. I don't have a sound effect button for that yet, but AFAB.
Assigned female at birth.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, you touched on a lot, and we're definitely going to get to some of that coming up. But let's move on to our next panelist, who would be. Oh, no, not wrong one. Okay. Let's get on to Dean.
Yeah, I'm uh, once again very involved in hearing other people's take on a question like that, and I can tell this is going to continue for the rest of the broadcast. There's so many angles to what I've experienced ever since my initial really bad heartbreak, um, which was about 2 decades ago, and I was suicidal for about 3 years. I had to see a therapist 5 times a week for 3 years just to get out of that state of mind. Uh, it was um, it was a relationship that I lost, um, and that just happened to be the heartbreak of a romantic relationship. There's been lots, there's lots of forms of heartbreak we experience, as we all know, going through life. Um, uh, that one tends to, a romantic relationship that's very entwined tends to, you know, probably make us the most vulnerable. I should say, has the highest likelihood of making us the most vulnerable, because we invest. There's no limit to what you can invest in a romantic partner. There are limits to how much of yourself you can invest in everything else. So, um, but it's still nebulous between. It's simply attachment, and and the biggest quandary for me just seems to be, uh, as as always, I don't even know where to start, but I'm gonna kind of keep the line going based on what I just heard, and that I was set adrift into the world the moment that the loss occurred, and all you can do is kind of swim around in the world and hope that you'll find enough people that relate to exactly what you're going through, that they can help you heal. And most of the time, y- you don't find that if you're seeking it out in the world. Um, and this was 2 decades ago, so people were even less uh, open minded about mental wellness and loss and things like that. People seem to be at least a little more sensitive to it now, with all the social changes. But at that time, it was kind of a, "Hey, dude, suck it up. You're a grown man." All the usual. And I tried my best to actually listen to them, be open minded, and take them up on it. I was looking for healing anywhere I could find it. And looking back on it, I do realize that a lot of the tough love, suck it up, um, advice that I got was likely more damaging than than the empathetic, and kind of genuine desire to help and connect, at least speculatively.
Yeah, and you've been through a lot of different relationships over the years, Dean. Like, and like you're not married right now, like a lot of people your age. Sorry to to call you out on age, but like you might be thinking like, oh, like am I ever going to find that true someone, or am I going to keep going through heartbreak? How do you deal with those emotions?
Um, we desire and we want until the day comes when we're so old that we don't anymore. And luckily, I'm far from that. But I am far enough along that it's getting harder to deal with satiating those desires. And I do tend to think, and here's part of the problem, is that desire itself is somewhat vilified, in this day and age, especially sexual desire. But sexual desire is very tied to romantic desire, and I, I maybe someday we'll figure out some existential way to truly separate it. But they're very linked, and for as long as we are human beings and not robots, uh, that will be the case. I believe so. It never really stops until you find these islands that, with any luck and any prayer, they last. They're huge islands, and you just get these huge islands of time that last a great while, and you're very contented after experiencing the depths and the torments of desire, that all of a sudden you're granted something from the universe, something from a twist of fate that you know meets your needs, your desires, your prayers for an extended period of time, even if all of a sudden that means finding yourself alone, and that's really all you needed the whole time, whatever it happens to be, this island that you find. And that's a beautiful thing. And sometimes that island of happiness or contentness, either or, I know they're a little different, but either or, if you find that and it lasts a lifetime, you're very lucky, because usually it is an island, and it will stop again at some point. And that's the paradox about it, is that the longer this great content period lasts, where you have the answer to all your desires and prayers, the more dependent you grow on it again, and the greater the heartbreak can be if you lose it again.
Yeah, it's definitely a long journey, and you really have to learn to love the journey because it and this goes for everyone out there in the world. Obviously, heartbreak is inevitable if you put yourself out there, and it's it sucks. We've all experienced heartbreak. We know what it's like. It's not a fun feeling. And if there's one point that people take away from this show, is that yes, heartbreak is inevitable, but there are things to learn from it. That doesn't mean it's good, all fun and everything, but um, try to take something from that experience, however horrible it was, and try to apply that for future experiences. That doesn't mean like you'll never get your heart broken again, or like you won't take your own advice in the future, but just know that you have to put yourself out there though. If you don't ever put yourself out there, then you're just going to be lonely, and some people want that. But if you're looking for love, but too afraid of heartbreak, well, we've got news for you, Jack. Let's take it from Chrissy. Before we let you go, let's put up the question again for those who may be just joining us. How have you dealt with heartbreak in the past, and how does it still affect you now? Take it away, Chrissy. You're on mute, Chrissy.
I have an interesting relationship with heartbreak, I guess. This depends on what decade we're talking about. In my first 30 years of life, maybe, when it came to, especially, I'm just gonna talk on romantic relationships. I was very preemptive about avoiding heartbreak. I think because early on, my first heartbreak was awful. And it was just, it was puppy love, but it's still, the pain of that was so acute. I was also holding up a major mental illness at the same time. So anytime you put any sort of grief on top of a mental illness that's untreated, it also makes things that much worse. It also made my symptoms worse. So my first memory of having a heartbreak was not only the pain from the heartbreak, but the exacerbation of symptoms to the point that, rendered me pretty suicidal. Not from the heartbreak, but from my illness of OCD. So I learned pretty quickly that as long as I can control the outcome of relationships, then I could avoid heartbreak. Throughout my 20s, I was pretty manipulative, pretty, gameplay, would, if I thought a relationship was coming to an end, I would make the jump first and find someone to replace that person. I mean, I was a pretty shitty person, but I have a lot of self-compassion for what I went through in my 20s as a result of what I went through earlier. I do regret how poorly I did treat people just to avoid my own pain. And that is something that I do live with, and that does come up for me. And now I'm 45 and actually in the dating world right now, and just recently got divorced. I'm pretty careful about about any of those behaviors, to not put anyone in that position, and also to be very mindful and aware of when I may be slipping back into some patterns, but also, again, really self-compassionate. I mean, my experience not only with living with OCD, and I'll get to that in a second, but OCD on top of trying to experience normal everyday life and dealing with emotions like grief and heartbreak. There are also factors in my childhood that did, and trauma and modeling on how we deal with grief, or watching people deal very unhealthily with grief. I didn't know that you could experience deep grief and work through it and be okay. So when you're denied that kind of emotional stability, but also the ability to complete an emotion and see that you can be okay with it. If you're denied that as a child or an adolescent, you don't know that you can survive heartbreak. So into my 30s, I probably had one of the bigger heartbreaks of my life, and it took me by surprise. So forget all the preemptive stuff. This dude just slaughtered me. And I remember specifically, and this is where it correlates with having OCD. So OCD very much deals with the inability to accept uncertainty. So this includes emotions, and this includes being able to know when something is going to end. So OCD is very much anxiety. So when you have intrusive thoughts and you have anxiety, you want the anxiety to stop, which is what fuels the compulsions. I need to keep trying to figure this out because I need to stop this suffering. So this is my personality. This is, part of my makeup. So when I got heartbroken, this was back in like 2013. I remember every day waking up and being like, what the fuck? Like, when is this going to end? And I would sit there and it felt like the flu without the symptoms. I mean, I was suffering in pain, but I didn't have a fever, or I didn't know. I just take some Theraflu and just knock this out all day. And I do recall the acuteness of that pain for a few weeks. Of course, I was able to work through it and I healed. It still impacts me to this day. I actually don't like coming in contact with that individual. And not because I'm angry, just because it hurts. It brings up a lot of those memories. But in that, I remember that was what changed me. The idea that I suffered so greatly at the hands of someone else really got under my skin on how I wanted to proceed in treating people moving forward. I thought, I don't want to be responsible for someone feeling this way ever. And kind of recognized the toxic patterns of my own life and did a lot of really heavy therapeutic work to change that. I recently got divorced, and it was a heartbreak, but I guess the pendulum swung a little bit from there, and I started to look at relationships that I could control, maybe that I had more control in, and I think a lot of that was walls that I put up. I don't want to experience that pain again. Not because I can't logically say, Chrissy, you can get through it and you can be okay and stronger, but just sometimes in reflection, when you think about the depths that heartbreak can put you in, there really just is this, whoop, I pass. Like, this looks much easier over here. So I did experience a heartbreak in my marriage, which ended about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. It was a slow burn. So it wasn't that acute, but it was a very slow burn heartbreak. And I will say, I don't know which is worse, because the slow burn is it accumulates, and you are experiencing it and trying to process it at the same time, not knowing what to do or the answers. And you just kind of keep going back, thinking things are going to be different. So if I had to choose the acute or the slow burn, I'm not really sure at this point. But I am, however, being very careful in my dating life right now because I just don't want to deal with either.
Yeah, well, I mean, the plus side when you're just dating, like if you don't like someone, you can just be done with
No, I
them.
like someone.
Yeah, yeah, just
It's unfortunate, and I tried not to. Like, trust me, those first few weeks, I was like, "Nope, nope," and then I was like, "Damn it."
they got you. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I wish you all the best with this relationship. So
Yeah, I do too.
yeah.
I wish myself the best too.
But you know, like part of it though is that like you're putting yourself out there again. You don't know, so there's a lot of pressure, and especially like you're putting it out there in the world. You're in a relationship, and now it's like, what happens if things start going downhill, and so on and so forth. A lot that goes on to mind, and especially after you're married for a while and you're getting back into the game, and it's just like retraining your mind. It's just like the next person that I'm going to get with. It could be like a short relationship, it could be a serious relationship, but it could end in like a complete ball of flames, and that's just going to be a part of the experience. But that's not easy, right?
I mean, I think a lot of it is just, I have noticed, and I have noticed a lot of protective mechanisms, maybe a little bit inflicted on the person because this is a bigger challenge. This person is not passive and I am not in control. But I don't want that. I want it to be an equal partnership. And that's different for me. And that's what makes it scary. So I have to push into vulnerability. And I have learned in the last couple months in just therapy and everything else that vulnerability is a weak spot for me. And it is not something that I'm just willing to um, I'm very vulnerable in a lot of ways, but in romantic relationships, I am not good at it. I am terrified, and it's just something I'm going to have to work at. And the way I look at it now is, if it might work out, it might not. But I do reflect on that horrible heartbreak in 2013, and I think, yeah, it was bad for a while, but I emerged out of that a stronger person and more resilient. Yeah, I might have a few more walls, but that doesn't mean walls can't be broken down. It just takes work.
Yeah. No. Thank you for sharing, Chrissy. And let's move on to Hannah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. First of all, thank you, everyone. I'm just like admire all of you and your vulnerability and can connect with so much of what you guys are saying. And I think like one word that sticks out that Chrissy was saying, right, is grief. It's grieving. It's grieving. It's heartbreak is grieving a part of you. It's grieving a person. It's grieving a future that you saw in your head. And where I'm at right now is I'm dating, but I'm straight fresh out of heartbreak. I'm still going through it, right? And so I'm right there with people, and I'm a very visual person. And so, I mean, it's extremely painful. I mean, there are so many times where I've been in my bed, clutching my pillow, screaming, begging God, like literally on my hands and knees, begging God for that person to come back and being willing to do anything. And so anything that can bring you to that point, it's scary. And I think one of the biggest things for me with heartbreak is I do not like to be out of control. And especially when someone does not give you closure, the closure that you want, when someone doesn't sit down with you and close the chapter with you, it creates a spiral of emotions. And that's what's happened to me. And so there's been this open space where I've learned a lot about myself because I spiral out when I do not have control. And I wanted closure from this person. And at one point, it's like they are not going to give it to you. So, how do you move forward? How do you handle this grief? How do you walk on and move past it? And like everybody else was saying, it's kind of like a day, it's a day to day. It honestly takes so much patience, dating and putting myself back out there, which was very difficult for me because I've also got my mental health struggles. I live with bipolar disorder. I had to go to treatment recently, but I put myself back out there. And I wrote a story once about this young girl who's going through a lot of heartbreak all the time. And there's this woman, this old woman who has never experienced heartbreak. And so the young woman goes to her and basically says, like, I want to do that. I don't want to experience this pain ever again. And the old woman tells her on her deathbed, basically, um, I did have the greatest heartbreak you could ever imagine. And the young girl says to her, well, what could that possibly be? And she said, the heartbreak of regret, because I never went out there for it. I never put my heart on the line. I never experienced that. And so I always remind myself with these kind of visual things that I don't ever want to look back and see the people who broke my heart as also the barriers that kept me from finding a love that I actually deserved. And so I understand the pain. I also understand the growth of heartbreak, because heartbreak has had to make me, and I'm sure it's like this for a lot of other people, reflect on issues that I have completely outside of romance, right? Like the fact that I struggle with emotionally regulating when I am not in control. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now when it comes to dealing with heartbreak, how I perceive it. And, anybody out there that's going through it, I think everybody here knows it feels like it won't end. It feels like it won't end. I've literally said this. I'm like, I don't know how many times I've said, I will never get over them. I will never move on, but you do. You do.
Yeah,
You have
and
to.
I hate hearing that you've people have been heartbreaky towards you. Um, what's their names?
No, it's
I will
okay.
find them.
Yeah, but you know what the thing is, Rudy, that's interesting too? One thing that heartbreak will show you is that the people that I was inviting in were not my mates. They were toxic. And so, in a lot of ways, it's just actually really made me reflect on myself, because at the end of the day, I invited these type of men into my life for a much deeper reason, and accepted not being loved and defining feeling unlovable as love. And so there's a lot of lessons that come out of it, as cliche as that might sound, but it's the truth.
Right, right. And we'll definitely get to lessons learned soon enough. Let's get on to question two. What are you eating, Chrissy?
I've been back to back all day and I was like starting to get lightheaded. So I'm just snacking on some goldfish.
You're good.
I love
Question
Such
two.
distracting. I'm so sorry. It's like trying to be discreet. I'm all like,
No, you're good. I
oh,
got you. I got you though. I got you. Have you ever broken someone's heart? If so, how did both of you react? I want to kind of pick up the pace too. So just let's be more mindful of time. Let's go to Shira.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I think part of dating for most people, if not everyone, is that there's rejection involved on both sides. And um and I think there's a spectrum of rejection to heartbreak. Not all rejection is heartbreak. Sometimes it maybe doesn't feel quite as extreme as that, but I've definitely had to reject people, and I think that's something that I really struggled with when I'm married now, but when I was dating, and I think I had to like learn over time ways to do that in the least harmful way possible. I think I can relate to some of what you said, Chrissy, that there are definitely mistakes that I made in my early 20s with dating where I would not want to reject someone. So I would kind of drag things out too long and then really hurt someone, or the opposite, where I was too afraid that they would reject me or that the relationship was going to end. So I would just kind of end things in a really hostile way or not in a respectful way. And so that's definitely something that I worked on and learned over time, kind of how to end a relationship respectfully. It's something I'm still working on with friendships, and other types of relationships, how to set boundaries or end relationships, if necessary, in a way that's respectful to both people and really acknowledges and validates how hard it is for both people, but that it can still be the best option at the time. But yeah, so I hope that's an area that I've grown in, and that um by my by my mid 20s or late 20s, that I've gotten better at that and can, hold space for the pain that that does inevitably cause, of course, but just try to do what I can to be respectful.
Yeah, and another takeaway from this show that people should take away is that if you have to take protective measures, if you have to put up boundaries, and um, that may break someone's heart because they feel rejected, that doesn't necessarily make you the bad person. You have to do what you have to do. Like, if you don't owe someone their love, your love. So if that just destroys someone's world or whatever, then that doesn't make you the bad person. There's all kinds of other things involved in there that may also include that person who is being rejected being a jerk. So, and or having unrealistic expectations, or building the other person up in their head as the end all be all. And if they ever get rejected, then that's just going to completely destroy their world. So many other things. And just want to stress that to people watching is that if you're on the heartbreaker, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are a bad person. Sometimes we got to do what we got to do. So let's go to Dean, who I'm sure has broken many a heart in his day. Let me unmute you, Dean.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, go.
Unfortunately, it wasn't quite like that. Um, it was a bit more like what Hannah was saying about that we. It's true that the more we are heartbroken as we go through life, the more disappointed, the more loss we experience, the more guarded we get. Um, and as such, like we miss lots of opportunities to kind of get close to people, form relationships, as well as just take general opportunities. I mean, we just start to grow so protective that we skip things that are vital aspects of living life. And as such, what seems to form as a result is regret. So there's another point. I've been struggling hard with regret all my life because of the absolute um, lack of ability to seize the many opportunities that have arisen constantly before my very eyes, before your very eyes throughout life. Everything from romantic to work related to everything. The universe is constantly, I mean, just being alive, your surroundings are constantly trying to give you these things that you want. But it's, there's also a flip side to that. I mean, obviously, there's a cost and a price and a risk to just about everything you choose to receive, and so you seem to get more and more sensitive to that and protective of it. Um, it does seem to be a loss of innocence. Heartbreak. It's definitely your first heartbreak is your first. It's almost your last lesson about what losing something about yourself that you cherished means. Um, that attachment to anything in this world is really an attachment to a huge part of yourself, and you lose that, you lose the part of yourself, and it just that seems to codify the definition of uh, a loss of innocence, at least that concept for me. So uh, yeah, it causes a lot of guardedness, a lot of protectiveness, and I also wanted to I wanted to answer a bunch of stuff I heard. It's fascinating what you guys are saying, really. but I think I'm yet again in more of a mood to just kind of listen.
Yeah, well, you're offering great input too as well, Dean, and I'm sure you'll have more to say in the future. So thanks again for being here. Let's hear from Chrissy.
Ugh, I hate this topic. I mean, I did some damage, and and the sad part is it wasn't about power or control. It was about protecting myself. And I just wasn't able to, I wasn't at a place to comprehend that when I was younger. And so it like reflecting on how I possibly made people feel or my behavior is just so, it's excruciating. I mean, it's one of those things where I wake up sometimes at 3 a.m. and I'm like, oh my God, remember what I did. And but again, there's a couple things I want to say. I did the best that I could to explain those things to people later on, and whether they were open to receiving it is not. It's not my like. It's not something I can take on. There were several people that were, which was amazing. So there was some closure there on my end to feel kind of forgiven, or just that we were kind of in good graces. But a few things that I wanted to point out is this. Again, we don't know what we're doing sometimes until we're at a place where we can recognize it. So when we're talking about like normal world emotion stuff, but we're also talking about living with a mental illness, especially one that might go undiagnosed for a long time or untreated for a long time, we develop a lot of maladaptive mechanisms to survive. So I look back, before I knew that I had a lot of childhood trauma and stuff, I was just surviving the best way that I knew how, which was walls, protection, push you away, pull you in, manipulation, this and that. But I didn't know any better. So all I can do now is that when I've reached a point where I can see that those behaviors were destructive and hurtful, I can just go, all right, then I can move forward and not do those things again. And really try to let go of the things that I did when I was just surviving. And I really try to emphasize that to myself, like, Christy, you did not know any better. The other favor that we can do for ourselves is to help us is to really dive deep, if you're willing and ready in your life, to understanding why we had these behaviors, or why these coping mechanisms, whether they were maladaptive or not, were present. Whether that's psychodynamic theory or therapy, or looking at attachment styles and things like that. Man, we can change. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter like what you've been through or what you've done, or how bad you've been hurt. There's always the opportunity to change. And one of the things I've kind of entering the dating field at 45, one of the things I really realized is that those behaviors are still pulling me. They're pulling me. Something will happen, I'll be like, well, I'm done with him. And I'll go through this whole scenario in my head wanting to dump him. And then I'm like, wait a minute, he's holding a mirror up to me. Like, so I have the opportunity to look into this mirror and make a change. But man, that reflection is painful. So it's, dating right now has really taught me that the heartbreak is awful when you receive it from someone else. But when you receive a heartbreak and you aren't willing to dig in to what you probably contributed to a relationship falling apart, you're actually receiving a heartbreak of not from your own self. And so I'm doing my best to avoid that, knowing full well there are just some butt heads out there that are just mean. But at the same time, a relationship, no matter whether it is healthy or whether it's toxic, it's two people contributing. And sometimes seeing those mirrors, as painful as they are, really can set you up for the next relationship or the next friendship or the next opportunity, for work or whatever else. Even if the pain is acute, even if it's tough, we never, ever have to stop growing.
Right, right. And there's often two sides to every story, especially with relationships. Yeah. Some people are just awful and abusive and to get away from them as fast as possible. But oftentimes in relationship, it's very messy, and we sometimes can just see things from our side, and like it's their fault. Like the reason why the relationship failed, the reason we were no longer together, is because of the other person and all this other stuff. They didn't understand me, they didn't appreciate me, they whatever. And so we also need to be mindful of, well, what did I do, like, and that sucks because you be vulnerable. You got to like look at like, oh, like I'm actually, I have some things that I still need to work on, and like I'm still a messy person, and if I don't work on these things, then it's probably going to happen again in the next relationship. But that's a story for another day. Let's get on to Hannah.
Yeah, no, I love everyone's honesty. And I think it's so true that, giving yourself compassion and forgiving yourself, because like Chrissy was saying, you're surviving and you're doing what you know how to do. I would say, as far as me being like the heartbreaker, and how I went about it, I think that, I'm in my 30s now. So I've had a lot of experience, and especially with advocacy, seeing and communicating with people and seeing the extent of which something like heartbreak can take an individual. I had a guy that was in love with me. Okay. Like, kind of, we were friends, but it happened very suddenly. And I could tell that he wasn't in love with me. He was in love with a fantasy, an illusion of me that he had kind of created. And I could tell his feelings were there. And, being that I'm older now and felt like I could handle it, I was very delicate. I took him out. We went like out on not a date. I told him it couldn't be a date. And I said to him, gave him the words that I wanted. I gave him the closure that I've never received, from other people, because it's really hurt me. And so basically, went about it in a way of saying, I'm not there, but this has nothing to do with you. It's not a reflection of you. One person likes a certain book, and another, and it doesn't mean it's a bad book. It's simply a reflection of what they want, what they admire. It could be the best book ever written. Um, but that still doesn't mean that every person's going to connect to it, and kind of let him down very easily. And that was a big thing for me, being able to give someone what I felt like I deserved in the past, but had not received, and opening my eyes that there is a way to do it that can help the person, as well. But we learn, just like as Chrissy, just like as Dean, all of us are saying that you grow. Life is about growth. And so you live and you learn.
Great points. So let's burn through question number three, and then we'll get on to final words and anything that we didn't get a chance to address or want to address something that someone else said. Let's get through that. So let's get on with it. What are some skills you have developed over the years to help avoid harmful relationships? Let's go to Shira.
I think the biggest skill I've learned, is just being really transparent about what my wants and needs are, in relationships, and also being really selective about the people and the spaces that I spend the most time with, and just really being intentional about spending time around people and in spaces that align with my values and are affirming of different identities I have, and really minimizing time around people that send up those red flags of not being affirming, not being accepting, kind of not respecting my boundaries, that kind of thing. And just really, just being intentional, being thoughtful. And I think, I look at it as like valuing my time and myself, and knowing like our time is really limited, and I'm gonna choose to spend time, my precious time, with people that build me up and that respect me, and not people that tear me down or are harmful. And I will just say, as part of being transparent and intentional, I one thing that I think really helped and is a big reason that I'm married now and in such a happy relationship is that I was very open about my mental health and other various identities of mine on my OkCupid when I was online dating back a few years ago, I think 5 or 6 years ago now, when I lived in Los Angeles. And I said, here's some mental health stuff that I struggle with. I identify as MAD, which is kind of a reclaimed term for mental illness. I identify as neurodivergent, and here's some needs I have. If you're not accepting of those things, like, please don't message me. Please don't waste my time. And from that online dating experience, I met my husband, and he is really accepting of those things and really a sensitive person who loves talking about his feelings and stuff like this. So I think that was really important to me, and I now continue to be open and kind of transparent in any friendships or other types of relationships that I'm forming.
That's when you know someone's a keeper, when you lay that all out and they're like, "Yeah, sign me up. I'm all about that."
Yes.
So, it'd be so helpful to learn all these skills, like, from the beginning. Why didn't someone try to tell us these things? Okay, well, let's go to Dean.
Agreed. Agreed. Why didn't someone? Why don't they teach this in school? I don't know. Um, it seems like there's a lot of important things we're supposed to learn in school. So how could we possibly fit all of it in? And emotional investment and attachment. I think this is something that if parents aren't going to sit their kids down at least a few times and talk about it, then it almost seems like it's the responsibility of the state, um, because uh, you know without that guidance, that early guidance, almost mandatory. It seems like it should be mandatory. It's very hard to not intertwine our ego with our investments, um, and our ego, I think, is on its own path. It's growing or blossoming or decreasing, or it's doing its own thing. And when it you know mixes in and blends in with all of these other concerns that are either more practical or sometimes even more romantic, but they're just separate. They're different from our sense of self-worth. And it's in the culture we currently live in society, and the social neglect that we still have about understanding the self, we just let that ego find its way, and I don't think it ever really does. I don't think it has. I don't think it's been focused on enough. Um, so, all this to say, to answer your question, though, I haven't. I wouldn't say I have actually devised any good new methods for, you know, causing less pain in relationships. Luckily, I'm in a relationship, and I've been in one for 17 years. That is finally, um, like we've met a crescendo. We've reached a plateau, like a pinnacle moment, where it's become something that we never imagined it would be. And during that 17 years, a lot has happened. I mean, we broke up twice. We one of them was for one of those times was for a year. We've been with other people. It's been one of those situations where, once that first heartbreak and loss occurred a couple of decades ago, it was anything. It was like it was static, just free electrons. It's chaos, and you just start to recognize the insanity that it all is, and how we're lucky if we can find some harmony in there and some happiness. And you try to find it anywhere you can get it. And luckily, it all just kind of wavered to a head. And my hope and prayer is that it stays there. But I've been out of the proverbial game, for dating and matters like that for a while now, because not only was I experiencing a lot of pain, but I was causing a lot of pain. And I just eventually recognized that the person I'm with is really all I need. Just her companionship does it all. So, uh, I can't say I would be any less destructive if I re-entered that stream. Um, but I did go sober last year, and that was not something I was actually not sober uh, for those last 2 decades of heartbreak, which I'm sure kept me in a certain suspended animation. So that is one thing I have to my advantage as of last year, only. And once you go sober, you then have to start the work. So I'm extremely, I'm just, luckily I'm old enough that it's like, I have enough experience that I can have some wisdom, some amount of wisdom towards myself. But I'm still pretty damaged, and I can tell, and I can see it clearly now, and own it, and be able to be vulnerable, like this in public a lot more often. I think a lot of my friends, and especially family, don't really understand that I am in this spot right now where I'm finally looking at just how messed up I am from all that, not just that one heartbreak 2 decades ago, but all the heartbreaking I experienced and dished out ever since then. To the point where, as an artist, which is really, it's such a subjective field, um, I've been paralyzed, and every little victory that I have is like an immense amount. It takes an immense amount of bravery for me at this stage right now, and I think my family are just like, hey, yeah, that's cool, man. Hey, there's Dean. Hey, he went sober. That's cool. Hey, good for you, man. Hey, come over here. Like, help me. Help me. Play center field. Whatever. And it's, yeah, it's. I'll go back to that adrift thing, but being set adrift in the world, it's, that's really, um, if you have good intentions, I know it seems like they're causing a lot of harm in the world, but if you maintain them, eventually, uh, you will embody them, and you'll be able to use them in some form, even if you have to reduce great aspects of your life to do it. Whatever it takes to be well in a world that you think is better for it.
Right on. And as someone who has seen you and your partner together, you two complement each other very well, and I'm rooting for you. So,
Thank you,
so
man.
hang in there, Dean.
Thank you.
Let's hear from Chrissy.
What was the question?
Let's put it up again. What are some skills you have developed over the years to help avoid harmful relationships?
The skills that I have learned are to get to know myself, and to validate what I feel like is painful, and validate what I'm willing and not willing to tolerate. And a lot of this is really, not to get all Jungian on us, but like really understanding what my shadow fears are. It's not an excuse to reject people, but it is an opportunity to see what I'm willing and capable of tolerating. To what degree am I willing to put myself in a position where someone is going to continue to do things that needles at my fear of abandonment, right? Yes, it's my fear, and I have control over being able to control my reaction to it. But do I want to be with someone who has avoidant attachment? Because that's going to continue to put me in a position to feel invalidated, or to feel like I, am not important, and things like that. So, the skills that I have to, and this is friendships too, really being able to see people's behaviors, and have self-compassion, or have compassion for them, when people are passive aggressive, or maybe they have, really toxic, defensive traits. I can have compassion for people that still have to deal with those things because maybe they've been through stuff. But does that mean that I want them close to me? No. And that has been something that has been a really slow process of learning. And I've had several different, the universe had to kind of kick me in the gut a few times. Like, how many times do you have to learn this, Chrissy? How many times do you have to see that people act like this and you continue to let them in? Um, but every single time it happens, it just confirms that I have a right, uh, and I should really get to know, who I am inside, and what and who is the best person to get close to me, whether that's friendships and whether that's romantic relationships or anything. It's sometimes hard to let go, especially when you have self-esteem issues when it comes to mental health, because you sometimes think you don't deserve people. But I have just absolutely learned that at the first signs of things that I know are going to push those shadow fear buttons, I just can't let them in. I just can't let them near me. And I don't think that makes me less compassionate or empathetic. It just makes me, more of a protector of myself down the road and a protector of them as well.
Right. And the compassionate doesn't always mean being super nice to everyone, whether they deserve it or not. If people
Right.
are being toxic in your life, then to the curb they go.
Right.
So
Kindly. Kindly.
kindly, yes, you can compassionately kick people to the curb. Take it away, Hannah. Sorry.
No, don't apologize. I love listening to everybody. And yeah, I think, short and sweet of it is one thing that Cheer said that stuck. I mean, she said everything sticks out, but that really connected with me is asking for what you want. I've always been petrified to ask for what I want. I go way too far in trying to please the other person, and really not allowing them to not even giving enough space to see what they can give me. I think a lot of that, as like Chrissy was just talking about, is insecurities. I find that relationships will connect more, and I won't have to worry so much about the red flags once I'm centered in myself. And I even see that now, the more I do therapy, the more I get confident and secure, the more I'm able to let go and stop trying to control the situation. These are things that have really helped me, and now I notice the red flags. I mean, I think you either feel it or you don't. I think that there are signs along the way. Some we choose to accept. A lot of them sometimes we choose to ignore. I choose not to ignore those anymore. And because I see, the thing about heartbreak takes a lot of emotional energy and time for away from an individual, and that's time that could be spent on themselves and with people that they care about. And I think, like a lot of people here, I no longer want to waste that time with people who are not aligned with me, or make me feel like I'm too much. So that's pretty much that.
Right, and I'm glad you touched upon that, the concept
Yeah.
of too much, 'cause that's something that we probably all
Yeah.
have been told at one point, "You are too much,"
Oh,
and,
yeah.
like, what does that mean? Does that mean, like, too bipolar?
It's
To
something.
to yeah, and,
Too
we know
dramatic.
yeah, we
You're
know
too
when the other person is
dramatic.
being too much, let's be honest, but, like
Right.
but it
That
just
statement alone is too much, like saying someone is too much, I think is too much.
yeah, like, you need more one thing I've learned is that like yes, we understand like what too much means, but like for the other person, we need to give more constructive feedback. If someone
Mm,
is being negative towards us or hurting us in some way or doing something we don't like, it's not enough to just say like you're being too much or like you're being an asshole or whatever. So the
Hmm.
more that we can fine tune that and really explain, articulate like what exactly is going on, the better off that we'll be and set ourselves up for more healthier relationships. But we can go on and on and on. And sadly, we have come to our end, but we do have time for final thoughts. And I want to make sure everyone has a chance to talk about anything that they didn't get a chance to talk about or address something someone else didn't want to talk about. If you just want to vent on something real quick, you're more than welcome to do that. If you got something going on in your life, I know Dean has got something going on, and so has Chrissy and Hannah. And so feel free to promote, feel free to talk about anything you want. Final thoughts, take it away, Shira.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this and just really appreciated everything that all of you said. I feel like I learned a lot and have a lot to think about. So I think that's kind of it. But thank you.
Where can we find you on TikTok?
I don't have a TikTok. But yeah, my Facebook is Shira Callings. My Instagram too is just shira.callings.
Yeah, and you're a therapist right now too. So like one thing that we can suggest, like if you have the means and you're able to, consider talking to a therapist, talking these things out, and maybe you'll find some growth in that. Maybe find some closure from past heartbreak. It's helped me in the past, but again, there's all kinds of hurdles. But I know awesome people like you, Shira, and others are working towards making therapy more inclusive and accessible. So I appreciate that. Let's hear from Dean. Final thoughts.
Um, well, I have a lot of them, so I'll skip all of them. Um, Based on everything that everyone has said here, which is really, really thought provoking, and actually triggering of lots of details about heartbreak that I would love to address, but we're at the end now. So I'll just say, being an artist is definitely it's it's really challenging. I would, if anyone's considering doing it, you really want to think about, you really want to strategize that, because the ills of and woes of our internal life make that they can wreak havoc on that type of profession. You can find me online if you Google, or pretty much, any main platform, Dean de Benedictus, and you can find my music. And I really do try to convey the depth of these experiences through the music, and people who are attentive to that art form might spot it. But it's very hard. I haven't. It's most of it's instrumental, so you're not going to hear it in the lyrics, which might make it more challenging to catch. But there's definitely a lot of emotion in there, and it's aside from that, it's a very separate world from this right here for me. But thank you guys, and Rudy, thanks for having me on, and I really enjoy listening to everybody. It clarifies a lot for me personally as well.
Yeah, and to be clear, you do have a lovely singing voice, so I hope to you do more
Thank
vocals
you.
in the future. And you have an album that just came out, so please tell people how to get that.
Sure. Oh, I sometimes use the alias Surface 10, which was one that I came up with in the 90s, oddly enough. And it's been many years since I released the last album under that name specifically. And just a week ago, I released one as Surface 10 called Astray Ending, which is kind of, that title is a metaphor for everything I've been talking about here. And in a sense, everything I've heard everyone else talk about. For me, that's what it means for me. Um, but again, find out for yourselves if you want to tune in. It's on a record label called DIN Records. It's a British record label. It's a small one. This is all indie stuff, and it's mostly instrumental music. But there's one track in the middle where you'll hear lots of famous dead poets and philosophers chopped together in a kind of almost like a new language. Um, and that's really all I can say about, philosophical content of my music lately.
Great. Thank you, Dean. Thank you for taking up the challenge, coming on last minute. I appreciate that. Hope to have you on again in the future. Let's hear from Chrissy.
Final words. One of the things I think is important to emphasize too is that heartbreak isn't just about pain, but it's a personal experience of really having to face rejection, which when a lot of us, we're like struggling with self-esteem and having dealing with mental health issues, rejection can be really painful, because then it is definitely a reflection of what is wrong with me, which is also the journey we go down with many of us do with mental health, because of the stigma and already feeling like damaged goods. What I do want to say is this, something really did wake up in me. I attempted suicide at 20. And after surviving that and surviving just the horrible experience that I had with OCD, something switched inside of me that just said, you know what, life is going to get shitty again. And it has been shitty, and I made it. And I need to look at life as a risk. I need to look at life as taking chances, Because there are times in my life, and I can trace back, that I was not in a headspace to take chances, and I did have to bury myself behind walls to heal or whatever else. So the greatest thing that I think that I learned from my experience with mental health and surviving suicide and hospitalization and all of that is just that life is meant to be lived, and we are on borrowed time for sure. And things aren't always going to be good, and but they're also not always going to be bad. So when you are able, take the risk. I've started multiple businesses, I failed at tons of stuff. And, when I got used to failing and being like, okay, failure, what do I do next? And then finally, hone that into something successful. Now my mission is, okay, I failed at a lot of relationships. Some were my fault. Some, weren't necessarily all my fault, and I got hurt, but like, how can I turn this into, really finding a partnership that I'm not afraid to fail. So I'm willing to put it all in and risk it for love, and risk it for companionship, and risk it to be a better person and help that person become better too. My grandmother fell in love when she was 85. And I watched this relationship, and it was like disgustingly awesome. She would be like, "We kissed." And I was like, "Grandma, no." Like, stop it. But like, I seeing them at their age, and and up until both of them passed, I remember thinking to myself, it is never too late to risk, because love is always there. Like, we can always find it. And so if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're in pain, or you're still suffering from a heartbreak, you know what? You're probably always going to feel that to some degree, but take the risk. There are great people out there, and even if they aren't romantic, you can fall in love with friends, and with life, and with pets, and with everything else. Love is worth the risk.
Thank you, Chrissy. Lots to chew on there. Always knocking out of the ballpark. I appreciate that. I'm glad you took on this challenge too. It's a little bit different from usual panels, usual stuff you speak on. So thank you. Hope to have you again in the future. Of course, you know it's going to happen. So,
Oh,
same thing with Hannah Blum. Take it away. Final
Yes.
thoughts.
First of all, thank you so much, Rudy. I have loved this. And to everybody here, I'm so inspired. I can't wait to check out everybody's page and their art and content. Real quick, to follow me, my main platform is Instagram. It's at Hannah D. Bloom. It's my name. And basically from there, you can find my book, you can find my blog, you can find all of my content. But what I really wanted to spend this final thought is two tips if you're going through heartbreak. Number one is pour it out. If you're an artist, if you paint, even you, there's like no such thing as good or bad writing, right? So if it comes from your soul and your heart, pour out all of it. Let it spill, and don't be ashamed of it. And the number two thing, I wrote an article about this years ago, and it actually went into high school textbooks because people were like, felt like it was really important, is stay off social media. And although it sounds silly in a way, it's like, haha, I'm telling you, if you are going through a heartbreak, you got to stop creeping on your ex. You got to stop following your ex. It is a very, and I've learned this in myself, a very, very dangerous line that gives you the illusion that you are still connected to a person you are no longer connected to. As hard as it is, I recently just had to block my ex because it would kept me from going onto his page. It was devastating. I was looking at his content, and it was spiraling me out. So that's a tip for anybody. Try to stay off social media. If you do it, it's nothing to be ashamed of, but I promise you it will help you heal from it. And the last thing that I'll say is always just remember that the shattered pieces of our heart, they're stepping stones to lead us to an even greater love in a person. And so you're not alone, and you'll get through this. And thank you to everybody here. I'm really in awe inspired. And love you, Rudy. Love you.
Well, thank you for being on here. I appreciate that. Um, Go follow Hannah. Go follow everyone. especially Hannah. Needs the most followers. She doesn't have enough followers, so just show her some. But again, thank you. And real quick, I wanted to give a special shout out to all right, my little birthday girl right here. She's getting big. Anime is 5 years old today. Yeah, she's 5. So wish her happy birthday. She's gonna do good things.
You're looking good for 5, girl.
Yeah, I know, right? She doesn't look a day over 4. So she means the world to me. And I can't say enough good things about her, as crazy as she drives me sometimes. But yeah, she's been in the room the whole time and has only started to squirm just now. So I'll have to wrap this
Oh,
up and take her out. But that is going to do it for this week. But we'll be back again in 2 more weeks. So still trying to build this YouTube channel. So please, 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 if you're watching this either during the live stream or watching later on the week, later on the month, please subscribe. Make sure you got notifications on, like, comment. It really helps. I really am committed to building this YouTube channel in 2023. And I really appreciate the help of these amazing people who are making it so, because I always am awkward talking on my own. So I'm glad that I can lean on these amazing individuals. So thank you, Cher Collins. Thank you, Dean De Benedictus. Thank you, Chrissy Hodges. Thank you, Hannah Blom. I'm Rudy Caseres. Again, you can find me at rudycaceres.com and we can talk from there. It's time to do the sign off. I'm bad at sign offs, so I always assign it to a member of the panel. And this time we are going to do, let's do Hannah. Sign us off, Hannah, and have a great week, everyone.
how do I sign up? Oh, bye.
Yeah, like Walter Cronkite said, like, and that's the way it was, or like, just think of
We
something cool.
came, we saw, we conquered. Subscribe to Rudy's YouTube channel because he's amazing.